That alone, verse number 51. Up to verse 50 of the Atmopadesh Satakam, the teachings have been regarding the external world in different forms, psychologically, religion-wise, cosmologically. Questions of ethics and other such topics are raised so that our mind is able to finally calm down. So you may say the first 50 verses are to calm down the mind. After the mind has calmed down, we can begin a serious probe, and that's what begins from verse number 51. These talks are available as podcasts on Spotify. Search for Word Wisdom in the Spotify app, and you can listen to the audio tracks. Coming now to verse number 51. Having existed in knowledge, an I-ness in the beginning emerges. Coming as a counterpart to this is a thisness. Like two vines, these spread over the tree of Maya, completely concealing it. Commentary. Our most distinct and undeniable experience is that of an I consciousness. The experiencing of I am is universal. When it comes, it is placed between two other entities, the world out there and the inestimable stretch of consciousness of which the I is only a part. We are not very clear about the delimitation that is made of our I consciousness. Yet when we say I am, we know it is not the whole of consciousness. Thus, on the one side is the physical world, and on the other is consciousness, the individuality of our own self that we feel as our personality seems to be a confection of both the world and consciousness. This body can be touched, it is physical, like any other body. To that extent we belong to the world, yet the non-physical consciousness of I, mine, not mine, and so on, is also part of us. How much of us is physical and how much is mental or spiritual? We cannot say, but we do know that both aspects are integral parts of us. It is evident that before we started recognizing ourselves as conscious entities, we must have been part of something very similar to the stuff of our consciousness. Narayana Guru presents this idea here as a basic substance out of which an I consciousness manifests. Then the individuated I simultaneously presents itself and what is other than the I and this, to itself. Next, the Guru brings in the imagery which he already introduced in verse 9 of a tree entirely covered with two vines, one called I and the other called this. This is one of the most important images of Atmopadesh Satakam, one for us to return to again and again in our contemplation. Many times we have pondered how that person sitting under the tree can remain unaffected by all the intrigues of the vines growing all around him. But this time, there is no person under the tree. He has become one of the vines itself, the I vine, although the tree remains the same. What is your main search? It is who am I, or what is this? If you were to go to Ramana Maharishi, he would direct you to find out who am I. If you went to Narayana Guru, he would ask you to find out what is this. Both I as well as this belong to one total reality. If you want to discover truth, you have to find out both. So if you are experiencing all this, what is the problem? The trouble is that your experience is not always correct. There is a possibility of error. If you do not avoid error, you can get into great difficulties. For instance, right now, when we look out the window, we can see a magical world of our city through a swirl of snowflakes. It is so beautiful. There is every temptation to rush out into that beauty, but it is a snare. If we were not properly prepared, we would be frozen to death in no time. I remember being in Canada when I first experienced snow. There was a very bright sun outside. I thought it would be wonderful to walk up to the post office and back. So I set out. Then I thought all the water in my eyes was turning to ice, that my eyes were crystallizing. I did not know how to save my eyes. I covered them with my hands and ran back as fast as possible to my room. I had never thought that the sun and snow could be so deadly. So like that, there are many dangerous errors we can make when we don't fully understand the situation. How do we avoid these errors? Narayana Guru presents us with a picture of a tree, which is to be looked at schematically. It has a base or root, and it has fruit. The root and the fruit mark two poles. One is the basis, the alpha, and the other is the omega, the culmination of fulfillment. The origin is the root, and the fulfillment in the fruit marks the vertical parameter. The horizontal component is the two sides. One is I see the external world, and the other is I have a mental image of the world. In other words, the objective and subjective aspects. For the most part, the analogy of the tree stops here. Don't press it any further. We have pointed out four aspects of truth: its foundation, its meaning, its subjective appraisal, and the objective experience of it. Of these, two belong intimately to I, and two belong to this. The external world and the fruit we are looking for belong to this. I am and my knowledge belong to I. Thus, the four possibilities of error can be further classified under two headings, I and this. When the fundamental truth of what I am is misunderstood, it is an epistemological error. When the meaning of life is misunderstood, it is an axiological error that is also called a teleological one. In other words, an error in value assessment stemming from the misunderstanding of the natural design and end of life. Teleos means out there, in the future, what is yet to come. So teleology is an error regarding the future. We ask ourselves, what should I become? What should I aim for? And what should I gain from my life? If you are mistaken about these issues, you might go on a wrong tangent, which is very serious. It is very important to know who you are and what you want to become. This marks the vertical parameter of life. In order to know how to discern truth, what is true and what is untrue, you should have a normative notion about it. You need a measuring rod by which you can measure truth and decide. This I accept as true, while this is untrue. This should be in your possession all day and all night, since at every moment you have to decide if things are true or not. If you make a mistake at this point, it is called a methodological error. If something actual is taken as not actual, or if something which is not actual is taken for actual, you are making a mistake at an ontological level. These are the purview of the horizontal parameter of life. So again, we have the possibility of epistemological errors, teleological errors, methodological errors, and ontological errors, and you need to be corrected of all 4 types of errors. In the Upanishads, we are given 4 great dictums. One is Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahma. This is to correct the epistemological error or the fundamental error by which a person thinks, I am the body. So much attention is given to a child's body, its clothes, its looks, and its actions, and the feeling, I am this body, comes to stay. We do not give equal attention to making the child understand it is also something other than the body. By the time we are adults, our body consciousness is disproportionate to our idea of the spirit animating the body. This is an epistemological error in our understanding. The main question to address this is, who am I? Narayana Guru says that phenomenal existence is totally covered over with I and this. The first dictum corrects this by answering the basic question, who am I, with I am the Absolute. To say I am the body is relativistically true, of course. We can see there are other bodies and that we are not pulsating within them as we are within this one. Our own body does have something special in a relative sense, but in the greater search, this conception is an error to be corrected. Before we consider the other 2 aspects concerning the meaning of life and the actual world, we have to develop criteria to know truth. The only discerning instrument we have is our mind and intellect. Yet we do not know how to differentiate between mind and intellect. We experience it all as part of our totality of consciousness. It is within this consciousness that we experience a certain faculty which decides things for us, known as the intellect. How does the intellect decide whether something is right or wrong? It certainly should not be by imitating others' opinions, though the fact is that we can be very much influenced by public opinion. Most of the things which we take for granted are not verified or critically examined. We just copy somebody else. But as Socrates said, an unverified life is not worth living. If you want to live a truthful life, it must be verified. And for verification, the evidence should come from your own self and not from someone else. This means the basic criterion you can adopt is the certitude of your own self-evidence. Ultimately, it should be evident to your own self. Gaining that kind of evidence means obtaining a normative notion. Norm means a measure, normative pertaining to measurement. A notion is an idea. So a normative notion is an idea you can measure by. Furthermore, you can measure something only with that which truly exists. You are most convinced of your own existence. Therefore, your own existence is to be made the basis for measurement. Even if a thing is true to all people, until it actually becomes your own experience, the truth of it is only an a priori intellectual acceptance. It has not yet become part of your life. However, what is tested and found to be true in the lives of so many other people who have gone before you is certainly very helpful for you to accept as a working hypothesis. It's a fine place to start. So you don't have to say that you will not accept anything until it becomes your own experience. First, you accept the universal truths that were found to be true by many before you. Then you try to integrate and experience them in your own life. For this correction, another great dictum was given by the Upanishads. I am Atma Brahma. this self of mine is the Absolute. Narayana Guru has already defined the self as that which remains in darkness and makes things known to us. That is the self. Now we say that self is the Absolute, the light which is within us, which is self-founded, which makes it known to us that we exist, and also makes it known to us that other things exist. That is the self. It is not contaminated with any relativistic notion such as I am the body, or I am in pain, I am happy, or I am unhappy. These are colorations. If the colorations are removed and you understand the Absolute, the pure notion that you have a very infallible measuring rod to discern what is true and what is not. This does not happen in a single day because your mind is already colored with many preconditioned prejudices. To experience I am Atma Brahma, this self is the Absolute, many accretions of the mind have to be rubbed off and removed. Many prejudices have to fall. You have developed many likes and dislikes because of your physical sense of pain and pleasure, the kind of food you have been given since childhood, the manners you were taught, and the social values on which you were nurtured. Hundreds and hundreds of colorations have come into your life, constraining it and directing it in so many arbitrary ways that to remove all these and know what the pure self is not an easy thing. But it is a great necessity if you want to adopt a correct methodology for the rest of your life, to make correct appraisals and to not mistake the right for the wrong. Once you have that correct method, you have a testimony to measure the truth of things. You have an immediate world to discern. There is snow outside, and it makes it difficult for you to drive your car. You cannot safely belittle that fact. It's an existence of a thing out there that has an ontological validity. In our transactional world, there are a number of things which have this existential quality, and they should be properly discerned. The discernment comes from your own self. There is an interaction between the self and the non-self. In that interaction, you are always deciding the quality of the non-self. If you fail here, it can be disastrous. The Upanishad give us another dictum to meditate upon, Prajnanam Brahma. The external world is presented to you as your knowledge of it. To you, you have no other way of apprehending it. The external world and your knowledge of it are the same. Its existence is in the existence of your knowledge. Now, if there is not a one-to-one correspondence between what is out there and what is in your knowledge, you are bound to make mistakes. So, if the snow is cold, you should know what that means. If the road becomes slippery when it is icy, you should know that. The truth that is in you is also the truth that has become manifest out there. Don't just call it Maya and dismiss it. Of course, the whole thing can be an error, but it is not a piecemeal one. If it is an error, it is wholesale. You are within that wholesale error now. Do not mistake something wholesale for something piecemeal. As long as you are within the frame of reference called the transactional, you have to give full validation to every item in it. It is here that the spiritual life of some people fails, because in the name of spirituality, in the name of philosophy, or in the name of realization, they belittle the validity of transactions. This ontological error is a big problem. To correct it, Prajnanam Brahma is given, to remind you that what is out there as your experience is born of the same reality that has produced you and your mind. Not until you realize this can you be at ease with the external world. All this is in preparation for a final search, a search for the meaning of your own life. If you do not know the goal of your life, you might walk into many snares. If someone compassionate who has found out what can be most beneficial to a human being tells you, "Go this way, my child," a lot of trouble can be saved. People run after so many things in their lives, and by the time they realize those things are all meaningless, they are too feeble in their bodies and shaky in their minds to make much of an effort. The intellect is no longer clear, and the memory is failing. Only when they are good for nothing do they realize that they didn't get anywhere. Since it is better to know this early, we are given a teleological pointer, Tat Tamasi, that thou art. This is the fourth great dictum. What is that, and how can I experience it? To answer these questions, you have to lift your mind from everything to which it is riveted. You are tied down to this body, this mind, to things. You need to loosen your hold to all those particulars to which you are now tied. This transcendence, this elevation, the sublimity to which you can rise, can be attempted day after day. By itself, this gives direction to your life. You may be an artist or a poet, an actor, a craftsman, a technician, or a person doing service to other people. Your vocation can be anything. All paths lead to Rome. In other words, all paths lead to salvation, to your final emancipation. If the path is not leading you to this, then it is a snare, and you should give it up. So, with a little insight, you can make any path lead to your salvation and emancipation. Let's say you are an artist. What do you seek through your art? Call it beauty. How do you decide what is beautiful? You go to that normative notion of which we spoke. The artist says, it is not by measuring anything with an external ruler, or weighing it, or using any other kind of brass gadget or electronic device that I come to know whether this is beautiful or not. When I look at it, my heart is filled. I get into a state of ecstasy. Then I know it is beautiful. Within you there is beauty. Only when a thing resonates with your true being, which itself is beautiful, do you know it is also beautiful. Every creation of beauty is a search to know more of you, more of your own self as the beautiful. Supposing you care for children, not necessarily your own, the central value here is compassion. Compassion is your passion. The passion of you and the child become commingled and flow in a single direction. For this to happen, what is most dear to you and what is most dear to the child have to be brought together as one unit of meaning in one common center. That is the self. It is the same self in you and the child. One's happiness is the other's happiness. Every time you relate this way, you discover the greater secret of your own self. So even though the meaning of life is given as teleological, that teleos is not very far off. It is in this very moment that you come to realize it. Then you go on to the next moment and the next. From the two aspects of ahanta and idanta, I-ness and thisness, you come to the core of both. What is in both I and this is called that. When you experience that in the self as well as the non-self, then the self and the non-self do not exist separately. This is a discipline which we need in order to go farther. The fourfold correction with 4 great dictums, a fundamental correction, a methodological correction, a correction of meaning, and a correction of your apprehension of actuality. And the free translation of verse number 51 is as follows. From pure knowledge emerges one's ego sense, simultaneously paired with the sense of thisness. Like a twin creeper, the self and the other entwine the Maya tree all over and hide everything.